Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers at NBC. Just wondering, do you have comments on those shows? And are they doing what Kimmel did Monday night? And is it even worse on those programs, in your opinion?
Well, look, you can be unfunny. That's fine. And a lot of people are sort of saying that, well, people are punishing Kimmel because they don't like a joke that he told. But, we don't need to rehash it here. But obviously what he said was not a joke. It wasn't presented at all that way. But when you look at these other TV shows, what's interesting is the FCC does have a rule called the equal opportunity rule, which means, for instance, if you're in the run-up to an election, you have one partisan elected official on, you have to give equal time, equal opportunity to the opposing partisan politician. So far, so good. But there's an exception to that rule called the bona fide news exception, which means if you are a bona fide news program, you don't have to abide by the equal opportunity rule. And over the years, the FCC has developed a body of case law on that and has suggested that most of these late night shows, other than SNL, are bona fide news programs. And potentially, I would assume you could make the argument that The View is a bona fide news show. But I'm not so sure about that. And I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs that you have still qualify as bona fide news programs and therefore exempt from the equal opportunity regime that Congress has put in place.
Got about 30 seconds.
I want more than anything is I want them to stop fooling around with my right to say what I feel.
Well,
I don't like being threatened. I don't like people running up on me. You don't like what I say. This is America. I grew up here. And the one thing I always knew is I had freedom of speech. And every time somebody says, I don't like what they said, so I'm shutting down PBS. I don't like what they do. Those are broad strokes which have nothing to do with reality. Because the fact of the matter is, just because you don't hear me say it doesn't mean I don't feel it. So my big thing is all the things you talked about, but this idea that you can no longer speak your mind as an American is really, really, especially coming from a group that always says, everyone's shutting us down.
Boy. So we got to continue our coverage of the massive copium overdose that is currently happening in the mainstream liberal media and amongst Democrats about Jimmy Kimmel getting his show indefinitely suspended from ABC because of the fact that he went on national television and he strongly suggested that Charlie Kirk's assassin was a right-winger, right? Even though there's no facts and evidence whatsoever to support this idea that he's a right-winger or a Trump supporter or MAGA or whatever. But that's what Blue Anon was putting out here, okay? And Jimmy Kimmel decided to peddle the Blue Anon conspiracy theory, and that led to his cancellation. Now, I think his cancellation has more to do than with his comments on Charlie Kirk. I believe that the Jimmy Kimmel show was financially struggling, just like the Stephen Colbert show. Again, a lot of these liberal late-night so-called comedians, propagandists really, you can't make money off of these guys, right? You got to pay them a lot, and they just don't have a positive return on investment, right? So, again, I think that the decision was more than just about Charlie Kirk, but what he said about Charlie Kirk certainly didn't help, okay? And now all of a sudden, Democrats and leftists who spent the last, 3 or 4 years telling us that, freedom from association is also freedom of speech, right? You don't have to associate with individuals who have viewpoints that you disagree with. That's a part of freedom of speech, except when people choose to disassociate themselves from liberals like ABC and a bunch of these local affiliate news stations decided to do with Jimmy Kimmel. Now all of a sudden they're crying foul, right? They're boohoo, whining, and crying. But what these liberals don't understand, especially in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk being assassinated, their tears do not matter, right? We don't care, okay? We do not care about liberals boohoo, whining, and crying, right? We do not care about your hypocrisy. We don't care about your whataboutisms. We don't care about any of those things right now. All we care about is the fact that liberals seem to be more upset with Jimmy Kimmel being canceled, his show getting canceled, than they were about Charlie Kirk getting assassinated.
Congressman, I see you are wearing a hat. What does that hat say?
You're damn right I am, John. I was a guest on the Jimmy Kimmel show. He
every night has a right to come into any house that wants to watch and entertain Americans, just as Greg Gutfeld on Fox has a right to be not funny and go on his network and entertain Americans. It's a part of who we are.
Stop. Neither one of those individuals have the right to work for a network that broadcasts to millions of people each night. No, they don't have a right. Nothing about being on ABC is a constitutional right. Networks and affiliates are private entities who choose who they air based on business decisions, contracts, ratings, etc. So these organizations have a right to fire him or suspend him. It's kind of wild a sitting member of Congress doesn't seem to understand this. This is goofy behavior. But he wasn't done. Let's let him continue.
Frankly, it should shake every American that the President of the United States is out there firing comedians who make fun of him. That is not who we are, and every American should care.
Donald Trump, 1, doesn't have the power to fire Jimmy Kimmel. 2, Donald Trump did not fire Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's mouth is what got him fired, insinuating lies about a political assassin that was on the left. On top of that, his ratings were continuously declining. Pay attention, because that's one of the Democrats' main plays. Put everything back on Trump. Jimmy Kimmel insinuates a disgusting lie about a political assassination in front of millions of people, and it draws public outrage. And the lie he was insinuating, again, was completely disgusting, and it was about a political assassination. So it drew public outrage, and companies decided, yeah, that was a mistake. We can't have that on our network. We don't want that on our network. That's done. But the Democrats are going to say Donald Trump. The play is bring everything back to Donald Trump. No matter what it is, attack the orange man. So to keep it simple, no. Donald Trump did not fire Jimmy Kimmel. Jimmy Kimmel's mouth got him fired. It's that simple.
Yeah, it really is that simple. I'm not entirely sure what's so hard to understand about this. Again, I just find the arguments, the mental gymnastics from the left to be fascinating. These people who were pro-cancel culture now all of a sudden are raging against cancel culture, right? These are the same people who wanted to ban your free speech to be able to state biological facts, okay? Now all of a sudden they are boohoo-whining and crying about free speech. Except, again, the problem with liberals boohoo-whining and crying about free speech is that they don't believe in free speech. And again, the reason why they don't believe in free speech is because they literally cheered Charlie Kirk having his free speech taken away from him permanently, right? They cheered that on. They cheered on an assassination that was meant to stop free speech, okay? And you cannot have free speech in a country where you have assassination culture being celebrated, okay? Because if you're being killed for your free speech, you don't have free speech. I don't understand what liberals don't understand about this, okay? Jimmy Kimmel being fired is not a free speech issue. It's not a free speech issue, okay? But Charlie Kirk being assassinated actually is a free speech issue, and they cheered on the silencing of free speech that they didn't like. This is why when they come out here and they talk about free speech, I just don't care, right? I just don't care about anything that these people say. I don't care about them boohoo-whining, cry about more hypocrisy, right? I don't care about the whataboutisms. I don't care about any of that, right? All I know is that a left-wing radical assassinated a conservative civil rights icon, right? Because that's ultimately what Charlie Kirk was, right? That will be his legacy, right? He was a civil rights icon. I know that will trigger a lot of people to say, oh, no, you can't compare him to MLK and blah, blah, blah. But, hey, I'm just saying, time will tell. Okay, time will tell. But I just think that when it's all said and done, again, he will be in the same conversation as, again, the people that we know as civil rights icons that move civil rights forward in this country, right? I really do believe that. So with that being said, that brings me to the actual real topic of this video, which is the cackling hands on The View, right? And as the mainstream liberal media is boohoo-whining and crying, a lot of people expected The View to boohoo-whine and cry, but surprisingly, they did not, right? They did a whole show, and they said nothing about what happened to Jimmy Kimmel, even though The View is on ABC, and everybody was expecting them to say something about it. But instead, they spent time talking about Epstein, a topic that they literally did not want to talk about just a few years ago. And now all of a sudden they want to talk about it 24/7, right? This is the most important topic that they decided to cover on their show today instead of talking about Jimmy Kimmel being canceled. Let's take a listen.
Let me just say who don't want to put out the information. Yeah. Who are saying, no, don't do it, don't do it.
But you're not going to get anything from
Let me say this. I think, to your question, Joy, the Wall Street Journal did report that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, told Trump in May of this year about his name appearing in the documents. Now, that in and of itself is unusual because remember back in the day when there were 3 separate branches of government and we had James Comey, who was very uncomfortable as the FBI director going into the White House and having meetings with Donald Trump, because that is really something that didn't happen before. You didn't have the FBI director speaking directly to the president. You didn't have the Attorney General speaking directly.
Law enforcement matters.
But they don't have dinner with them. That's just not a normal thing, this sort of blurring of the lines that we're seeing now. And I will also say this, you know, Kash Patel was so evasive. He was asked 9 times about whether or not he had the Epstein files, the Epstein list, and he was evasive every single time. He kept on saying that a court order prevented him from providing it. If you look at the court order, which, I did. If you look at the court order, the judge rejected DOJ's efforts to unseal the grand jury, writing that the government itself is the logical party to make the Epstein files public, and criticized the motion that the government had provided, had moved for as a diversion tactic.
So say that.
So again, the point of me playing this clip is to give you guys some insights in regards to what they decided was a more important thing to talk about than one of their colleagues, right? One of their fellow propagandists, okay? Being canceled, right? Or at least, you know, getting suspended for now, right? We don't know if it's permanent. But let's just say their audience did not appreciate this, right? Because the comment section is getting lit up on this video. Quote, "If I were to remain silent, I'd be guilty of complicity, Albert Einstein." The View apparently doesn't consider the Jimmy Kimmel situation a hot topic. No Kimmel discussion. Wow. No mention of what happened to Jimmy Kimmel yesterday. I love The View, but this is highly hypocritical. They criticize Colbert being fired from CBS, but won't criticize their own boss for suspending Jimmy Kimmel. What a joke. What about the Jimmy Kimmel situation? Not surprised. The silence is deafening. What about Jimmy Kimmel? Don't silence the ladies of The View, ABC. Now, again, I find this to be fascinating. Did ABC tell them not to say anything? Or did they just decide, you know what? Heads are rolling, right? Heads are rolling in the mainstream liberal media. Shows are getting canceled. We could be next, right? I don't know if The View is profitable because, again, that's what a lot of this comes down to. I don't care about the viewership numbers. People will say, oh, well, The View has, they have millions of viewers. And it's like, okay, well, are they making money, right? When you got to pay all of those cackling hens, okay, 5 and 6 of them, when you're paying them millions and millions of dollars a year, the show costs millions and millions and millions of dollars to produce. Are they making a profit, right? Are they bringing in enough revenue? Stephen Colbert, we know for a fact that he wasn't, despite his views, right? And I think Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel, they all kind of the same at this point, right? Jimmy Fallon, that's the other weirdo comedian. But in the case of Jimmy Kimmel, I mean, and probably Jimmy Fallon as well too. Yeah, I mean, they're probably losing money. And again, I think that's the real reason that they decided to cancel Jimmy Kimmel, at least for now. But again, I think that same question should be asked about The View, right? This person says, I specifically came to watch them talk about the Jimmy Kimmel show being canceled, yet they don't mention it because they work for ABC. That is owned by Disney, so the fact that they are so scared to mention it is crazy. Cancel your Disney subscription. Yeah, I mean, what are they going to do? Right? What are they going to say? Are they going to come out here and advocate for people to cancel their boss, right? To cancel their parent company? Fascinating stuff. And like I said, there's a lot of backlash that The View is getting. Their fans are devastated over this.
Does anybody else watch The View? Because I think there's some drama, or at the very least, some tea brewing over at that round table. Because I tuned in today. I didn't even just tune in. I was locked in and ready for Joy, Sunny, Anna, and Whoopi to give their perspectives on what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. And guess what? They said nothing, zero, zip, zilch, nada on the subject of Jimmy Kimmel. Instead, they went into their regularly programmed schedule. They talked about Kash Patel. They had some celebrities on. They talked about their projects, but nothing about Jimmy Kimmel. Now, if you watch The View, you know that, yeah, they might have a schedule, but if there's breaking news, these ladies drop everything and tackle that breaking news story. Now, to be fair, Anna wasn't on today's episode, but I went over to her Instagram page and she is always posting about the latest breaking news. And guess what? She didn't post anything about what happened to Jimmy Kimmel. She didn't even include a mention or a repost on her stories. So these are all red flags. The View and the Jimmy Kimmel Show are both on the same network, ABC. So I wonder if maybe they got some directive from higher ups to not say anything. Or, and this would be worse, I don't know if what happened to Jimmy Kimmel is leading to a chilling effect on their ability to freely express their views. Like, did the ladies get together and come to a consensus that this was a story they didn't want to touch because maybe it makes them nervous? Like, I want to know what's happening. Why didn't they talk about what happened?
If you know anything about this show, you know they talk about everything from entertainment to politics to cultural to anything going on in life, okay? They talk about it. Whether you like the show or not, they talk about these things. With that being said, today they didn't talk about Jimmy Kimmel. This is media suppression. This is right out of Project 2025's playbook. Look at this, okay? Brendan Carr is the FCC chairman. Look at the meme that he posted. This is out of a dictatorship playbook. Wake up. We need to do something, or 2028, Trump will remain in office. He will. And we will not have elections. And if we do, he will put himself back into office one way or another. We are entering, and we have entered, an extremely dangerous time in this country, and we need to do something. We need to do something fast. This is dangerous.
You know it's bad in America when even the ladies of The View are not commenting on the news of the past 24 hours. I watch The View every morning. My boyfriend put me onto it. It's become part of my everyday routine. And at the start of their show, every day they cover the hot topics. And I think what happened yesterday is a pretty big hot topic. But it was silent. None of this is particularly shocking considering that both of the shows are ABC shows. But for a show called The View that's supposed to give both viewpoints of any sort of debate or topic, to me, it seems like they've been told by execs or higher-ups not to cover the story because they're so particularly outspoken on these sort of things every day that it's jarring that they're not today. Or it's really possible that they're just worried about retaliation or their own jobs because this is now what you have to worry about in this administration.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Okay, let's continue reading some of the comments that the viewers, the fans of The View, have been posting in response to the fact they've gone silent on one of the biggest news stories this week. Wow, I am stunned. There is no mention of the Kimmel situation. One Redditor wrote, with others predicting that the show itself is at such a high risk to be canceled as well. Yeah, I mean, they're probably next, right? To be honest with you. Talking about breakups, somebody else vented, that's so trivial compared to all the stuff going on. They may have to start talking about more things not to do with Trump administration to stay on air. Another suggested what a mess this timeline is. The View is a news opinion show. They have the right and protection to say what they feel. That is the basis of the show. Another empathetic fan pointed out, calling response or lack thereof shameful. It's so hypocritical of the network, another wrote in frustration. We spent a week talking about how we don't condone political violence. Well, I mean, liberals didn't do that, right? But everybody else did. We can disagree. Use your words, free speech, First Amendment. And then they punish Jimmy for using his words. Well, I think that Charlie Kirk's punishment was worse than Jimmy Kimmel's punishment. So again, none of these these sob stories from the Democrats and liberals, they don't faze me, okay? I don't care about them, again, talking about hypocrisy and free speech and all that stuff. None of these people care about free speech, okay? Democrats are the biggest hypocrites because they're the ones that were for cancel culture. Now, all of a sudden, they're against cancel culture because they feel like it's being used against them, even though this is not cancel culture. This is accountability culture. And clearly, you can see The View, they're afraid of being held accountable because we know how often they say unhinged things on that show in which they have to come out and read a legal note because of the unhinged things that they say. So I guess they chose to just be quiet about it, right? Which I think is a good move, right? I actually support The View. doing what they're doing when it comes to this Jimmy Kimmel situation. Yeah, it's probably best for you not to speak about it, right? I think liberals are learning that, you know what, if we don't have anything good to say, it's probably better to not speak at all, right? Let's just stop talking, because the more that we talk, the more trouble that we get in. And I think the calculated heads have kind of picked up on that, right? They know that they can be next on the chopping block if they say the wrong thing. And again, it doesn't have anything to do with Trump, right? Which is what these people are claiming. It has everything to do with the fact that the culture has turned against Democrats and liberals and leftists, right? These people have become social pariahs. People are looking at leftists, Democrats, liberals, and they're saying, nah, these people they're too extreme, right? We can't have people like this being a part of the mainstream conversation, right? Just because of how extreme they become. So I think that's what's happening. Again, the View could be on the chopping block. Who knows, right? It certainly seems as if they're afraid. They're afraid to talk about Jimmy Kimmel. But we'll see. Maybe they will talk about it. At this point, the fans don't seem to appreciate them avoiding the topic. So we'll see. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.